Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the city of Mecca in the early 7th century. The air is thick with the scent of frankincense and myrrh, carried on warm desert winds that whisper through narrow alleyways. In this ancient city, where the sacred Kaaba stands as a beacon for all of Arabia, a story unfolds that would echo through the centuries, touching the hearts of countless souls across time and space. This is the story of a woman whose light was so radiant that she earned the title Az-Zahra, the resplendent one. A woman whose face seemed to glow with an inner luminescence, as if she carried within her a fragment of divine light itself. This is the story of Fatima Binti Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon her and her father. A woman whose life, though brief, blazed across history like a shooting star, leaving in its wake a trail of inspiration that continues to guide believers to this day. Tonight, as you settle into the comfort of rest, allow yourself to journey back through the corridors of time. We will walk the dusty streets of Mecca together, witness moments of extraordinary courage and tender love, and discover truths about faith, sacrifice, and devotion that speak to the very essence of what it means to be human. This is not merely a historical account. This is the story of a soul so pure, so devoted, that the Prophet Muhammad himself declared her to be among the greatest women who ever lived, placing her alongside Mary, the mother of Jesus, Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh, and Khadijah, her own blessed mother. Her story is one that has been told countless times, yet within it lie layers of meaning and moments of profound beauty that deserve to be revisited again and again. For in understanding her life, we come to understand the heights to which human character can soar when illuminated by faith. In witnessing her struggles, we find strength for our own. In contemplating her devotion, we discover a map for our own spiritual journey. So breathe deeply, let the tensions of the day melt away, and prepare your heart to receive this blessed story. For tonight, we will meet Fatima Az-Zahra, the beloved daughter of the final prophet. And in meeting her, we will discover something extraordinary about the nature of love, faith, and the eternal human quest for meaning. Fatima came into this world in the blessed city of Mecca, though the exact year remains a matter of scholarly discussion. The mainstream view places her birth around 605 of the Common Era, approximately 5 years before the first revelation, while other traditions suggest she was born closer to 615 after prophethood had begun. What we can say with certainty is that her birth was no ordinary event, for she was born into a household where the very foundations of human history were being reshaped. Her father, Muhammad ibn Abdullah, was already known throughout Mecca as Al-Amin, the trustworthy one, a man whose character shone like a beacon of integrity in a society often mired in moral confusion. Her mother, Khadijah bint Khuwaylid, was a woman of extraordinary wisdom and strength. A successful businesswoman who had already lived through decades of experience. She had chosen Muhammad as her husband precisely because she recognized in him qualities that transcended the ordinary ambitions of men. Khadijah was a woman who looked beyond the surface of things, who saw the light in people's souls. And in Muhammad, she had found a light that outshone all others. The traditions that have been passed down through the generations speak of something extraordinary that happened when Khadijah gave birth to Fatima. The women of the Quraysh tribe, who would normally assist at such times, refused to come to her aid. They were already beginning to distance themselves from the family of Muhammad, sensing perhaps that something was shifting, that this household was somehow set apart from the ordinary life of Mecca. Left alone in her moment of need, Khadijah faced her labor with concern. But then, as later traditions recount, 4 magnificent women appeared before her, women whose faces seemed to radiate with a celestial light. They came to assist her, and their presence brought an inexplicable peace and comfort. These narrations, preserved in various Islamic sources, identify them as blessed souls from paradise itself, including Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh, who had believed in Moses, sent by divine mercy to attend to the birth of this special child, whether understood literally or as a reflection of the spiritual significance of this birth. The story speaks to the extraordinary nature of Fatima's arrival into the world. When Fatima finally entered the world, those who later told her story felt as though a new light had been kindled in the universe. She was the youngest of Muhammad and Khadija's daughters, born after her sisters Zainab, Ruqayya, and Kulthum. She had also had 2 brothers, Qasim and Abdullah, but both had died in their infancy, leaving an emptiness in the household that only the warmth of this new arrival could begin to fill. The traditions that describe Fatima's early childhood paint a picture of a child who seemed different from others her age, from the accounts that have come down to us. We understand there was a gravity about her, a depth that suggested unusual sensitivity. She appears to have been acutely aware of the emotional currents that flowed through her household. The narrations suggest that while her sisters enjoyed the carefree abandon of childhood, little Fatima often seemed contemplative, watching the world around her with an intensity that those who knew her found both touching and remarkable. Her father's special affection for her shines through in every account. Based on what we know of their relationship, it seems he saw in her a reflection of all that was pure and good in the world. A natural paternal instinct would have made him want to shield her from the harsh realities that he sensed lay ahead. But shield her completely, he could not, for the world was about to change in ways that would touch every member of this blessed household. Fatima was approximately 5 years old when everything changed. One night, her father came down from the mountain cave of Hira, where he had been spending long periods in meditation and contemplation. But this time, he was different. He was trembling, overwhelmed by an experience so powerful that it had shaken him to his very core. He had encountered something beyond the physical realm. The angel Gabriel had appeared to him with a message from the Creator of the universe. Read, in the name of your Lord, who created. Muhammad ibn Abdullah was no longer simply a respected merchant and a man known for his trustworthy character. He had become Muhammad Rasulullah, the messenger of Allah, chosen to receive and convey the final revelation to humanity. The household erupted into a mixture of awe, concern, and an almost palpable sense that they were standing at the threshold of something momentous. Khadija was the first to believe, offering her wealth, her support, and her unwavering faith in her husband's mission. And little Fatima, though she could barely understand the full implications of what was happening, knew that something extraordinary had occurred. She watched as her father's face would light up when revelation came, as if he were witnessing something too beautiful for words. She saw how he would spend long nights in prayer, how he spoke with increasing urgency about the oneness of God, about justice, about the need for human beings to live with consciousness and compassion. The child Fatima became one of the earliest believers in Islam. While most of Mecca remained stubbornly attached to their ancestral traditions of idol worship, while many actively opposed and persecuted this new message, little Fatima stood firm in her faith. She attended the secret gatherings of the early Muslims, held in homes or in the protected sanctuary of Dar al-Arqam. She would sit quietly, absorbing the verses of the Quran as they were revealed, watching as her father transformed scattered individuals into a unified community bound by their submission to the one true God. But with this transformation came a terrible price. The leaders of Mecca, the powerful elite who profited from the existing social order, saw in Muhammad's message a threat to their power and privilege. They began a campaign of persecution that would test the faith of every early Muslim, including the young girl who was the Prophet's daughter. One incident from Fatima's childhood has been preserved in the historical records with such vivid detail that it seems to leap across the centuries, allowing us to witness it as if we were there. It was a day like many others in Mecca. The sun beat down mercilessly on the sandy streets. Muhammad had gone to the sacred Kaaba to pray, as was his custom. Fatima, though she was not yet 10 years old, accompanied him. As the Prophet stood in prayer in the place known as Al-Hijr, a group of men gathered nearby. These were no ordinary men, but some of the most vicious opponents of Islam. Abu Jahl, known for his militant opposition to the new faith. Uqba ibn Abi Mu'ayt, a man whose cruelty knew few bounds, and others of their ilk. They watched Muhammad praying with contempt written across their faces. Then Abu Jahl, in a moment of malicious inspiration, turned to his companions and asked, "Which of you can bring the entrails of a slaughtered animal and throw it on Muhammad?" It was Uqba who volunteered for this vile task. He hurried away and returned, carrying the disgusting remains of a slaughtered camel, its intestines and other refuse still wet and foul-smelling. As Muhammad went into prostration, his forehead touching the ground in humble submission to his Lord, Uqba threw this filth onto his back. The weight of it was such that Muhammad could not rise from his prostration. He remained there, pinned down by this degrading burden, while his enemies laughed and jeered around him. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, one of the early companions, was present, but he was powerless to help. Too few in number and too weak in social standing to challenge these powerful men. But then came Fatima. Someone had run to tell her what was happening to her father. She came rushing through the streets, her small feet flying over the hot sand, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and righteous anger. She was just a child, but in that moment, she exhibited the courage of a warrior. Without hesitation, without regard for her own safety or dignity, she went straight to her father. With her own small hands, she removed the filth from his back, piece by disgusting piece, her face streaked with tears of grief and indignation. The crowd fell silent for a moment, perhaps moved by the sight of this child's devotion, perhaps shamed by their own cruelty. Fatima then turned to face them, her young voice ringing out clear and strong as she berated them for their shameful behavior. She stood between her father and his tormentors, like a lioness protecting her cub, fearless in the face of men who would not have hesitated to harm her. This was not an isolated incident. Day after day, young Fatima witnessed the persecution of her father and the early Muslim community. She saw how stones were thrown at him as he walked through the streets. She heard the insults hurled at him, the mockery, the threats. She witnessed the courage of those who accepted Islam despite knowing the price they would pay. And she saw those who, unable to bear the pressure, recanted their faith. When Fatima was approximately 12 years old, the persecution reached a new level of intensity. The Quraysh leaders, frustrated by their inability to stop the spread of Islam, decided on a strategy of total social and economic boycott. Muhammad and all the members of the clans of Banu Hashim and Banu Muttalib were forced to retreat to a small, rugged valley known as Shib Abi Talib. It was a desolate place, enclosed by rocky hills on all sides, accessible only through a narrow mountain pass. For 3 long years, Fatima and her family lived in this harsh refuge. Food was scarce, often reduced to nothing more than a handful of dates or a small piece of bread. water had to be rationed carefully. The cries of hungry children echoed through the valley, a sound that could be heard even in Mecca, a testimony to the cruelty of the boycott. The Quraysh stationed guards to ensure that no food or supplies reached the Muslims. Only during the sacred months or the season of pilgrimage, when tribal customs demanded a temporary truce, did some relief come. For a young girl at the threshold of adolescence, these were formative years in the harshest possible sense. Fatima's body bore the marks of this ordeal for the rest of her life. The malnutrition and hardship affected her health permanently, leaving her more fragile than she might otherwise have been. But if her body was weakened, her spirit was strengthened. She learned what it meant to persevere in faith when all outward circumstances argued for despair. She learned the meaning of community as the Muslims shared what little they had with one another. She learned to find joy in the simplest things, a sip of water, a kind word, the comfort of her parents' presence. And then, when Fatima was around 15 years old, tragedy struck in a different form. The boycott ended, but the relief was short-lived. Within a few months of returning to their homes, Khadija, Fatima's beloved mother, fell ill and passed away. The woman who had been Muhammad's greatest support, his first believer, his confidant and friend, was gone. For Fatima, the loss was devastating. She had already lost both her infant brothers. Now she was losing the mother who had been her guide and protector. In that same year, Abu Talib, Muhammad's uncle and protector, also died. It was a year so filled with grief that it became known as the Year of Sorrow. Muhammad was bereft, and Fatima, in her own grief, found herself taking on a new role. She began to care for her father in ways that a mother would, showing him tenderness and concern that seemed to flow from a wellspring of compassion far beyond her years. It was during this time that Muhammad began to call her by a new title, Abiha, the mother of her father. This was no mere affectionate nickname. It was a recognition of the role she had assumed, the way she nurtured and comforted him, the way she seemed to sense his needs even before he expressed them. As Fatima grew into young womanhood, her character became increasingly evident to all who knew her. She earned another title during these years, Az-Zahra, which means the radiant one, or the resplendent. This was not merely a reference to physical beauty, though by all accounts she was indeed beautiful. Rather, it spoke to something that seemed to emanate from her very being, a spiritual luminescence that those around her could almost see and feel. The spiritual traditions tell us that when Fatima stood in prayer, the prayer niche itself seemed to reflect the radiance of her devotion. Her countenance, we are told, would glow with an otherworldly light, as if the purity of her heart and the intensity of her connection to Allah manifested as something visible to those with spiritual insight. Some of the scholars and mystics of later generations interpreted this to mean that Fatima had been created from the light of paradise itself, that she was a soul whose very essence was intertwined with the divine light that illuminates all of creation. Whether understood as literal illumination or as a metaphor for her spiritual state, these descriptions speak to the profound impression her devotion made upon those who witnessed it. Her worship was extraordinary. While most people struggled to complete their 5 daily prayers with presence and concentration, Fatima would often stand in prayer from after the evening prayer until the break of dawn. Her son, Imam Hussein, would later recall, "I often witnessed my mother absorbed in prayer from dusk to dawn. She would stand so long that her feet would swell, lost in communion with her Lord, seemingly unaware of physical discomfort or the passage of time. But there was something even more remarkable about her prayers. When she prayed, she didn't pray for herself. One night, her son Hassan asked her, "Mother, I noticed that you mention others in your prayers, but you never mention yourself. Why is this?" Her response revealed the depth of her selflessness. "My dear child, the neighbors first, then the household." Think about that for a moment. Here was a woman who had endured poverty, persecution, and personal loss. A woman who lived a life of such simplicity that she often went to bed hungry. Yet when she stood before Allah in the quiet hours of the night, her thoughts were not of her own needs, but of others. She would mention by name every believing man and woman she knew, asking for their guidance, their protection, their entry into paradise. Only after she had prayed for the entire community would she turn to her own family's needs. And even then, she would place herself last. She was also given the title Al-Batul, meaning the one who is cut off or devoted. This referred to her asceticism and her dedication to worship. While other young women her age might spend their time in social gatherings, enjoying the company of friends, seeking out entertainment and diversion, Fatima spent her time in prayer, in reading and contemplating the Quran, in acts of worship and devotion. She had cut herself off from the frivolous pursuits of the world, recognizing them for what they were, temporary distractions from the eternal reality of the divine presence. The Prophet Muhammad himself taught her special prayers and supplications. One of the most famous is what has become known as Tasbih Fatima, or the Tasbih of Zahra. It consists of saying Subhanallah, glory be to Allah, 33 times. Alhamdulillah, all praise belongs to Allah, 33 times. And Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest, 34 times. This simple practice, which takes only a few minutes to complete, was the Prophet's gift to his daughter. And it has been passed down through generations as a blessed practice for all Muslims. Imam Baqir, one of Fatima's descendants, would later say about this practice, "If anything better than this existed as a gift, the Messenger of Allah would have given it to Fatima." Such was the value of this simple remembrance of Allah, this way of keeping the heart connected to the divine presence through the regular repetition of phrases that acknowledge God's transcendence, express gratitude, and affirm His greatness. As Fatima entered her late teens, proposals for marriage began to arrive. She was, after all, the daughter of the Prophet, and many prominent men of the community saw in such a union an opportunity for prestige and closeness to Muhammad. Abu Bakr, the close companion of the Prophet and a man of considerable standing in the community, approached Muhammad to ask for Fatima's hand. The Prophet gently declined, saying that he was waiting for a divine indication regarding her marriage. Soon after, Umar ibn al-Khattab, another prominent companion and future caliph, also came to propose. He too was turned away, with the same response. Muhammad was waiting for divine guidance regarding his daughter's future husband. These rejections might have been puzzling to some. After all, both men were among the most respected members of the Muslim community. Both were wealthy and could provide well for a wife. But Muhammad knew that wealth and social status were not the criteria that mattered. He was waiting for someone whose heart matched his daughter's, someone whose soul resonated with hers in that deep place where two spirits recognize each other as companions on the journey to God. That person was Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's cousin and foster son. Ali had been part of Muhammad's household since childhood, taken in by the Prophet when Ali's father, Abu Talib, faced financial difficulties. He had grown up alongside Fatima like an older brother. He had been one of the very first to accept Islam, a boy of perhaps 9 or 10 years old when revelation first came to Muhammad. He had grown into a young man, known for his courage in battle, his wisdom, his devotion to Allah, and his deep love for the Prophet. But Ali was poor. He owned little more than a shield and a simple dwelling. He had no wealth to offer as a dowry, no material security to provide. For months, he wanted to approach Muhammad to ask for Fatima's hand, but he held back, embarrassed by his poverty, fearing that he would be rejected just as the others had been. Finally, encouraged by friends, Ali summoned his courage and went to the Prophet. He could barely get the words out, so overcome was he with nervousness and humility. Muhammad listened to his halting request with a smile playing at the corners of his lips. When Ali finished speaking, Muhammad simply asked, "Do you have anything to give as a dowry?" Ali replied that he had nothing except his shield, a piece of armor he had earned as his share of war spoils. Muhammad told him, "Sell the shield and bring the money." Ali did so, receiving between 400 and 500 dirhams for it. When he brought the money to Muhammad, the Prophet accepted it and gave his blessing to the marriage. But the most remarkable part of this story, as related in various Islamic traditions, is that this marriage was not merely Muhammad's personal choice. The narrations tell us that the angel Gabriel descended with a message from Allah himself, commanding Muhammad to give Fatima in marriage to Ali. This was understood by believers as a union ordained in heaven, a match of profound spiritual significance. Some traditions even state that it was Allah himself who performed the marriage ceremony in the heavens, with the angels as witnesses, before the earthly ceremony took place in Medina. These accounts, whether taken literally or understood as expressing the blessed nature of this union, speak to its importance in Islamic tradition and the belief that certain relationships carry divine approval. The wedding itself was a model of simplicity. There was no extravagance, no ostentation. The feast consisted of dates, some barley bread, and a special sweet made from dates and clarified butter. The entire Muslim community was invited, and they came to celebrate this union that would prove to be one of the most significant marriages in Islamic history. The Prophet himself prepared the bridal chamber in Ali's simple home, which consisted of little more than a mat made of sheepskin and a few basic household items. Aisha, one of the Prophet's wives, was asked to help prepare Fatima for her wedding night. She and Salama brought good quality sand from a nearby valley to plaster the walls of the humble dwelling. They arranged date palm barks into cushions and prepared simple refreshments. When everything was ready, the Prophet came to lead Fatima to her new home. As they walked through the streets of Medina, with Fatima dressed simply but with dignity, Muhammad's eyes must have been filled with a complex mixture of emotions. Joy for his daughter, confidence in the rightness of this union, perhaps a touch of sadness at seeing her leave his household, and certainty that this marriage was blessed by divine approval. When they reached Ali's door, Muhammad placed Fatima's hand in Ali's hand and said a prayer that has been remembered for centuries. "O Allah, bless them both, bless their house, and bless their offspring." And blessed they were. From this union came 4 children who would play pivotal roles in Islamic history: Hassan and Hussein, who would be revered as the second and third imams by Shia Muslims and honored as the grandsons of the Prophet by all Muslims, and Zainab and Kulthum, both of whom would demonstrate extraordinary courage and faith in their own lives. Through these children, particularly through Hassan and Hussein, the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad continues to this day. All those who claim descent from the Prophet do so through Fatima, making her quite literally the mother of a blessed lineage that has spread across the Muslim world. Life in Ali's household was far from easy. There was no wealth, no servants, no luxury of any kind. Fatima took on all the domestic work herself. She ground grain by hand until her palms developed painful blisters. She drew water from the well until her shoulders ached from the weight of the water skin. She cooked, cleaned, cared for her children, and managed the household while Ali worked to provide whatever he could for the family. One day, when Fatima's hands were particularly blistered and sore from grinding grain, Ali suggested that she go to her father and ask for a servant. Some captives had been brought to Medina after a military expedition, and Ali thought perhaps the Prophet could assign one to help his daughter with the heavy household work. Fatima, despite her shyness about asking for help, went to her father's house. But when she saw him, surrounded as always by those seeking his guidance and attention, she couldn't bring herself to ask for what she wanted. Instead, she simply greeted him and left. When Ali heard what had happened, he decided they should go together. That evening, the Prophet came to their home. They explained their situation, how hard Fatima worked, how her hands had become rough and blistered, how exhausted she was from the daily labor. The Prophet listened with compassion. He understood their difficulty, but his response was not what they expected. He didn't give them a servant. Instead, he taught them something far more valuable. He said, "Shall I not tell you of something better than what you asked for? When you go to bed at night, say Subhanallah 33 times, Alhamdulillah 33 times, and Allahu Akbar 34 times. This is better for you than a servant." Some might have been disappointed by this response. After all, remembrance of Allah doesn't grind grain or draw water. But Fatima and Ali understood the deeper wisdom in their father's teaching. Physical help is temporary and limited. But connection with Allah, the peace and strength that comes from constant remembrance of the divine, this is a resource that never depletes, a source of energy and resilience that transcends physical limitation. Ali would later say, "I have never failed to recite it since the Messenger of Allah taught it to us." Even in the midst of his later responsibilities as caliph, even during battles and political challenges, Ali maintained this practice. And Fatima, despite her continued physical hardships, found in these words a strength that allowed her to bear her difficulties with grace and contentment. Their home, though materially poor, was rich in love, in faith, in spiritual practice. It was said that Ali never angered Fatima, and she never angered him. They lived in harmony, supporting each other in their devotion to Allah. When one of them was weak, the other was strong. When one felt discouraged, the other offered hope. Their marriage was a living testament to what the Prophet meant when he taught that the best among people are those who are best to their families. And despite their poverty, accounts tell us they were known for their generosity. There are stories preserved in the tradition of Fatima giving away what little food she had to those who came to her door hungry, even when she herself had not eaten for days. One narration speaks of a necklace, said to be the only item of value she owned. According to this account, when a poor man came asking for help, she gave him this necklace to sell. The story continues that through a series of events, the necklace eventually returned to her after having fed a hungry person, helped someone in need, and resulted in the freeing of someone who had been enslaved. Whether the details occurred exactly as told, or whether the story serves as an illustration of her extraordinary generosity, it captures something essential about her character: a willingness to give all she had to help those in need. The relationship between Fatima and her father, Muhammad, was something extraordinary to witness. In a culture where emotional reserve between parents and children was often the norm, their mutual affection was open and undeniable. Whenever Fatima would enter a room where the Prophet was present, he would stand up to greet her, a gesture of respect that amazed the companions. He would kiss her hand or her forehead, seat her beside him, and engage her in conversation. He would treat her not just as a daughter, but as an honored guest, as someone whose presence brought him joy and comfort. The companions noted this special relationship. They saw how Muhammad's face would light up when Fatima approached. They heard him say on more than one occasion, when asked who he loved most in the world, "Fatima." It wasn't that he loved his other children less, but there was something in Fatima that seemed to embody everything he valued most deeply: piety, devotion, humility, strength in adversity, and unwavering faith. He said about her, in words that have been preserved in the most authentic collections of hadith, "Fatima is a part of me. Whoever pleases her has pleased me, and whoever angers her has angered me." This was more than mere fatherly affection. It was a recognition that there was a profound spiritual connection between them, that Fatima's soul was somehow a reflection of his own spiritual essence. Aisha, the Prophet's wife, observed that Fatima resembled her father not just in physical features, but in her manner of speaking, her way of walking, her gestures. Everything about her reminded one of the Prophet. It was as if she had absorbed his character so completely that she had become a living embodiment of his teachings and his spiritual presence. During the final illness of the Prophet, in his last days in this world, Fatima was constantly at his side. She tended to him with all the love and care that a devoted daughter could offer. And it was during these days that one of the most poignant moments in Islamic history occurred, an intimate exchange between father and daughter that would be remembered for all time. The Prophet called Fatima to his side. He whispered something in her ear, and she began to weep, tears streaming down her face. Those present, including Aisha, were puzzled. Why was she crying? What had he told her? Then the Prophet whispered something else to her, and suddenly she smiled, even laughed. The witnesses were even more confused. How could she go from weeping to laughter so quickly? Fatima, respecting her father's confidence, refused to reveal what he had told her while he was still alive. But after his passing, when pressed by Aisha, she finally shared the secret. The Prophet had first told her that he would die from this illness, that his time in this world was coming to an end. This news had broken her heart, causing her to weep. But then he had told her something that brought her joy, even in the midst of grief. She would be the first of his family to join him in the next world. She would not have to endure a long life without him. And more than that, he told her she would be Sayyidat Nisa al-Jannah, the chief of the women of paradise. For Fatima, this was not a morbid prediction, but a promise of reunion. Her tears had been for the loss of her father's physical presence, the voice she loved, the face whose light had guided her through life. But her laughter came from the certainty that separation would be brief, that she would soon be with him again in a realm where separation would never come. The Prophet Muhammad died in the year 632, in the month of Rabi al-Awwal. For Fatima, the loss was almost unbearable. Historical sources agree that she wept constantly in the days and months that followed. The companions noted that they never saw her smile again after her father's death. The light that had always seemed to surround her appeared dimmed by grief. She would visit his grave, sit beside it, and mourn deeply for the man who had been not just her father, but her greatest supporter and guide. But her grief was compounded by other difficulties. After the Prophet's death, disputes arose within the Muslim community about succession and about property. Fatima became involved in these controversies, particularly regarding the land of Fadak. which she claimed had been given to her by her father during his lifetime. When this claim was disputed and the land was taken for the public treasury, Fatima felt deeply hurt by what she perceived as an injustice. She delivered a famous sermon in the mosque, known as the Khutbah of Fatima, in which she eloquently defended her rights and expressed her pain. It was one of the rare occasions when she spoke publicly, and those present were struck by her eloquence and the power of her words. She inherited her father's gift for moving people's hearts, for making truth palpable through the force of sincere expression. The controversy took a toll on her already fragile health. She grew weaker, more withdrawn. She spent her days in prayer and in caring for her young children, but the vitality seemed to be slowly draining from her. The sources differ on the specific circumstances surrounding this period, with various traditions offering different perspectives on what transpired. What they agree upon is that she was still a young woman, not yet 30 years old, and that the combination of grief and difficulty was overwhelming. In the month of Ramadan, just 6 months after her father's death, Fatima woke one morning with an unusual expression on her face. Those who saw her that day noticed that she seemed somehow different. Not ill exactly, but as if she were seeing something or sensing something that others could not perceive. She seemed almost joyful, in contrast to the grief that had marked her days since her father's passing. She asked for water to bathe, then put on fresh clothes. She asked for her bed to be placed in the courtyard of her house, and as she lay down upon it, her face turned toward the sky. She called for Ali and told him, "I have an appointment today with the messenger of Allah." She instructed him about her burial, asking that she be buried at night, without ceremony, wanting to maintain her modesty even in death. She didn't want her body to be seen or discussed, didn't want a public funeral that would attract attention. As the afternoon waned into evening, Fatima's breathing became slower, more peaceful. She closed her eyes, and her soul departed from her body, returning to its creator. She was reunited with her father, as he had promised her she would be. Based on the different dates given for her birth, she lived somewhere between 18 and 29 years in this world. A brief life by any measure, but what years they had been. Years filled with trials and triumphs, with hardship and grace, with sorrow and unshakable faith. Ali washed her body with the help of Asma bint Umays, who had been helping to care for Fatima in her final days. True to her wishes, she was buried at night. The exact location of her grave was kept secret, according to her request. Some say she is buried in the Basi cemetery in Medina. Others say she is buried in the Rauda, the blessed area between the Prophet's house and his pulpit. The uncertainty about her grave's location stands as a final testament to her humility, her desire to be hidden even in death, to let nothing come between the believers and their devotion to Allah and His Messenger. Her sons, Hassan and Hussein, were still young children when she died. They would grow up without their mother, but the legacy she left them, the example of her faith, her devotion, her strength in adversity, would guide them throughout their lives. And through them, her spiritual influence would extend across generations and continue until the end of time. Today, 14 centuries after Fatima's brief sojourn in this world, her story continues to inspire millions. She is remembered as one of the 4 greatest women in Islamic history, alongside Mary, the mother of Jesus, Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh, and her own mother, Khadija. The Prophet himself declared in an authentic hadith, "The best women of the women of paradise are Khadija bint Khuwaylid, Fatima bint Muhammad, Maryam bint Imran, and Asiya bint Muzahim, the wife of Pharaoh, Her titles: Az-Zahra, the Radiant One; Al-Batul, the Devoted; Al-Siddiqa, the Truthful; Sayyidat Nisa al-Jannah, the Chief of the Women of Paradise. Each speaks to a different facet of her extraordinary character. Together, they paint a picture of a woman who embodied the highest ideals of faith and virtue. What can we learn from her life today in our modern world that seems so different from 7th century Arabia? Everything, it turns out. For the challenges Fatima faced: loss, hardship, persecution, grief. These are universal human experiences. And the qualities she demonstrated in facing these challenges: faith, patience, courage, selflessness, devotion. These too are timeless virtues that speak to the human condition across all ages and cultures. She teaches us that true nobility has nothing to do with wealth or social status. She was the daughter of the Prophet, yet she lived in poverty, ground her own grain, drew her own water, and never complained. She shows us that dignity comes from within, from the quality of one's character and the depth of one's faith, not from external circumstances. She teaches us about the power of devotion. In our distracted age, when our attention is constantly pulled in 1,000 directions, Fatima's example of focused, sustained, deep worship challenges us to reconsider our priorities. She would stand in prayer for hours, not because she had to, but because prayer was where she felt most alive, most connected to the source of all meaning and purpose. She teaches us about selflessness. Even in her prayers, which are traditionally seen as the most personal, intimate form of worship, she thought of others first. How many of us can say the same? How often do our prayers become litanies of our own wants and needs, forgetting that the highest form of prayer is not petition, but praise, not asking, but thanking, not self-focus, but surrender? She teaches us about the nature of true love, the love between parent and child, between husband and wife, between human soul and divine presence. Her relationship with her father shows us what mutual respect and affection can look like. Her marriage to Ali demonstrates that true partnership is built on shared values and spiritual compatibility rather than material considerations. And her devotion to Allah reminds us that the deepest longing of the human heart is not for any created thing, but for connection with the Creator. She teaches us about strength in the face of adversity. Fatima's life was not easy. She knew hunger, loss, persecution, and grief. Yet she never became bitter, never lost her faith, never stopped caring for others even when her own pain was great. In an age when we often hear messages about avoiding discomfort and seeking ease, Fatima's example reminds us that growth often comes through difficulty, that character is forged in the crucible of hardship, and that the most beautiful souls are often those who have suffered most but refuse to let suffering diminish their humanity. Most importantly, perhaps, she teaches us about hope. Her life reminds us that this world is not our final destination, that the struggles and sorrows we endure here are temporary, and that there is a greater reality awaiting those who maintain their faith and integrity. Though her life was brief by worldly standards, she lived so fully, so completely in accordance with divine will, that her years contain more meaning than many people pack into far longer lifetimes. And so we come to the end of our journey through the life of Fatima Az-Zahra. Though in truth, her story has no end. It continues in the hearts of all those who hear it and are moved to live more consciously, more faithfully, more lovingly. It continues in every mother who sacrifices for her children, in every daughter who cares for her parents, in every person who chooses faith over comfort and principle over convenience. As you drift off to sleep tonight, let the story of Fatima settle into your heart like gentle rain soaking into parched earth. Let it water the seeds of faith and devotion that lie dormant within you, waiting for the right conditions to grow. Let her example of patience in hardship comfort you in your own difficulties. Let her devotion to prayer inspire you to deepen your own spiritual practice. Let her selflessness challenge you to think less about yourself and more about others. Let her courage embolden you to stand for what is right, even when it is difficult. And remember that Fatima, despite all her extraordinary qualities, was human like us. She felt pain, knew fear, experienced doubt and sorrow. What set her apart was not superhuman abilities, but sustained choices. The choice to trust in Allah, the choice to remain devoted in worship, the choice to be kind, even when kindness was hard, the choice to maintain faith even when circumstances seemed to argue against it. These choices are available to all of us. We can all, in our own ways and according to our own capacities, walk the path that Fatima walked. We can all strive to be people whose lives radiate light, whose characters reflect divine attributes, whose presence brings comfort and inspiration to others. May Allah have mercy on Fatima Az-Zahra, the beloved daughter of His beloved Prophet. May He be pleased with her, as she surely pleased Him. May He grant her the highest station in paradise, in the company of prophets and martyrs, and those whose righteousness earned them eternal felicity. And may He grant us the wisdom to learn from her example, and the strength to apply those lessons in our own lives. Sleep well, dear listener. Let the story of this remarkable woman accompany you into your dreams. And perhaps, in the morning, you will wake with renewed determination to live a life of purpose, faith, and devotion. A life that, in its own unique way, reflects something of the radiance that earned Fatima her eternal title. Az-Zahra, the resplendent one. May her light continue to shine across the centuries, guiding us all toward the divine presence that was the center and meaning of her extraordinary life. Amen.